Marshall Peak, Chapter 5996, Defeat, Marshall Peak. The Azure Dragon Spear was given to young Kai by RDA when he was still living in the star boundary. In other words, the spear had accompanied him for thousands of years, during which they experienced numerous battles and slaughtered countless enemies together. As the spear was an artifact refined from the body of a divine, its grade was so high that it was practically unmatched. Be that as it may, Mo had managed to cause a crack to appear in such an amazing spear. It was easy to imagine the intensity of this battle. After all, even the body of a divine dragon could not withstand the force of Mo's attacks. After the first crack appeared on the spear, a second and third crack quickly followed. It did not take long before the entire body of the spear was covered in fine cracks. The spear was on the verge of shattering to pieces. When Mo noticed the cracks on the spear, a hint of mockery appeared in his eyes and his attacks became fiercer and fiercer. Yang Kai suppressed the reluctance in his heart and summoned his Tao strengths with all his might. Then, he thrust out with his spear. As soon as the violent forces collided with each other, the impact caused his body to freeze for a moment. The spear that had accompanied him for thousands of years simultaneously shattered into 1,000,000 pieces in his hand. Mo had been waiting for this very opportunity. When the Azure Dragon Spear shattered to pieces, he jumped forward and punched Yang Kai. This punch was meant to become the deciding factor of this battle. He strongly believed that Yang Kai would be forced to avoid his blows after losing his weapon. If that was the case, then he could steadily press forward and gain complete control over the flow of the battle until Yang Kai became powerless to fight back. Contrary to expectations though, Yang Kai did not retreat from the blow even after the Azure Dragon Spear shattered to pieces. The space-time river, which was originally wrapped around the body of the spear, seemed to have gained spirituality and clung tightly to his arms. Facing Mo's attack directly, Yang Kai threw a punch in Mo's direction. The Tao strengths fluctuated violently. At the moment when both forces collided with each other, a powerful impact manifested as a visible halo of light centered around the two opponents flashed. The halo of light swiftly spread out in all directions. Everywhere the light passed, space shattered and collapsed. It was quickly followed by the appearance of numerous enormous void cracks. The Ninth Order Masters who had arrived at the periphery of the battlefield turned pale with fright. Faced with the approaching fallout of the battle, they quickly summoned their strength to defend themselves against the impact. Nevertheless, they were still sent flying. They, who were no longer at their peak strength, were instantly thrown into disarray by the impact. Luckily, the two giant spirit gods stood in front of them and bore the brunt of the shockwave. It was only thanks to the protection of RDA and RR that there were no casualties. Once the effects of the aftermath passed, they couldn't help looking slightly flustered and bitter. They originally came here intending to help Yang Kai. Halfway into the journey, the Allied army was forced to stop at a distance and discontinue their forward march because the troops could not withstand the overwhelming pressure of the battle. At this moment, they were horrified to discover that even Ninth Order Masters like themselves could not approach the battlefield. They would be torn apart by the aftermath of such powerful attacks. As things stood, the only ones who could be depended upon were the two giant spirit gods, RDA and RR. Mi Jinglun looked up at the two behemoths and instantly realized that the two giant spirit gods could not be counted on either. The survivors were exhausted after the arduous battle. Even RDA and RR were no exception. While the two giant spirit gods managed to resist the shockwave just now, they were still pushed back significantly by the impact. Under these circumstances, it was impossible for any of them to intervene in the battle. They would only be a burden for Yang Kai if they recklessly charged forward. Mi Jinglun was abruptly struck by a saddening realization. The only thing they could do after coming here was to witness the unique battle with their own eyes. That was an unimaginably heartbreaking truth. When the aftermath fully dissipated, everyone looked towards the battlefield from behind RDA and RR. The scene that greeted them made their hearts tighten with fear. Yang Kai was steadily being pushed back, seemingly at a complete disadvantage. Compared to an ancient entity like Mo, Yang Kai's heritage was simply too shallow. The slightest negligence or careless mistake could become fatal. Waste. During the battle, Mo suddenly yelled in frustration. Yang Kai flew backwards like an arrow released from the bowstring following a vicious strike. The space-time river wrapped around his arm suddenly emerged behind him and he fell into the river, diffusing some of the impacts from the blow. It did not take long before he stepped out of the river once more. His complexion was pale, and a trickle of blood dripped from the corners of his mouth. Mo did not pursue Yang Kai. He simply stared coldly and calmly stated, "My offer from before still stands. Give up your futile resistance and hand over Mu's inheritance. I guarantee that the human race will have a place to live in the future." Yang Kai turned his head to the side and spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, he grinned wickedly, "Kill me, then you can deal with the human race as you please." Mo closed his eyes gently. When he opened them once more, his murderous intent overflowed. He did not bother to speak again, and his figure abruptly vanished from where he was standing. By the time he reappeared again, he was already standing in front of Yang Kai. The sudden disappearance and reappearance were not a trick of space principles, rather, his speed had simply reached such an extreme. Yang Kai did not seem surprised by these movements. With a backward grab, the space-time river that was originally flowing behind him transformed into a whip and appeared in his hand. The long whip then lashed out towards Momo frowned slightly but did not dodge aside, he simply threw a punch instead. The punch struck Yang Kai squarely in the head. The blow made his head arch backwards, and his skull seemed to crack from the impact. He was immediately drenched in blood, nevertheless, the long whip wrapped around Mo. Standing so close to each other, the blood-drenched Yang Kai grinned at Mo, "I finally caught you." He seemed to have been waiting for this moment. After he finished speaking, he gave the long whip in his hand a sharp flick. The space-time river manifested once more, and the raging currents instantly engulfed the two figures. Before their figures vanished from view, the masters standing in the distance vaguely heard Mo's mocking voice sounding in their ears, "Since you're so eager to die, I will fulfill your wishes." Afterwards, the space-time river that stretched out into the void suddenly boiled and bubbled violently. Meanwhile, the Grand Tao's strengths trembled agitatedly. These were the results of the battle between Yang Kai and Mo in the space-time river. The Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters couldn't help being extremely nervous at the sight. The space-time river was the condensed crystallization of Yang Kai's 10,000 Grand Taos. Even if fighting in the space-time river would give him a considerable advantage over his opponent, that was not enough to overcome the fact that Mo's cultivation was in a higher realm than his. Besides, the Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters had seen the previous battle with their own eyes. Under Mo's powerful offensive, Yang Kai could only parry and defend at most, he had no strength to fight back whatsoever. That was the result of the undeniable gap in their strengths. Rashly dragging his enemy into the space-time river was both an opportunity and a danger. If he failed to defeat Mo in the space-time river, then he would not be able to guarantee his own safety in the space-time river. The churning of the river waters became increasingly turbulent. Waves rose and fell, splashing around fiercely. At the same time, countless Tao strengths appeared and disappeared mysteriously. Although the Ninth Order Masters could not see the ongoing battle, they could deduce that Yang Kai was at a disadvantage just by looking at the changes in the space-time river. The situation lasted for several days. The Ninth Order Masters were about to rush forward to help when the churning river suddenly turned calm. With their hearts in their throats, they watched the space-time river intently. They knew that the outcome of the battle had been decided. Mi Jing Lun immediately sent a transmission to his companions, ordering them to be ready for action at any time. A figure suddenly stepped out of the river. To their horror, the figure that stepped out turned out to be not one but two figures. Mo held Yang Kai by the head, dragging him with one hand. Yang Kai hung limply from Mo's grasp as though every bone in his body had been broken. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5997, Spacetime Shadow. Marshall Peak. Standing above the spacetime river, Mo held Yang Kai's head as though holding a chicken in his grasp and snorted, "Useless waste. You don't have the right to continue living." Then, he abruptly exerted great strength in his hand. How could Yang Kai, who had lost his ability to fight, withstand such an attack? His head instantly exploded from the impact, however, Mo did not stop there. It punched out and smashed the crippled body to pieces. The scene was imprinted in the eyes of the Ninth Order Masters who were watching the battle from afar. They stood frozen in shock and stared in disbelief. Yang Kai died. The man who was the best at creating miracles and turning the tides of war countless times. The man who had saved the human race from various catastrophes. Did he die just like that? They instinctively refused to believe the scene before them and subconsciously wondered whether they were looking at an illusion. However, the dissipation of his aura that followed the destruction of his body could not be faked. Everything indicated that he was really dead. Yang Kai had died at the hands of Mo. Only a short moment had passed from the time Yang Kai was dragged out of the space-time river by Mo. Moreover, Mo had not hesitated in the slightest when he killed Yang Kai. Everything happened so quickly that the Ninth Order Masters had no time to even think about rescuing Yang Kai. A shrill but mournful phoenix cry rang out, accompanied by a furious dragon roar. Su Yang and Yang Xiao transformed into their divine spirit forms and charged towards Mo. The rest of the Ninth Order Masters also followed suit and sprang into action. Despite knowing that they were no match for Mo, nobody hesitated in the slightest. Now that Yang Kai was dead, there was nobody in this world who could compete with Mo. Black Ink's strength would soon gain complete control over the universe. When that happened, the human race would no longer have a place to live. This was the final struggle. Su Yang was the fastest. After all, the Tao of Space was the bloodline talent of the Phoenix clan. She had lost her mind after being consumed by her feelings of rage and sorrow. At this moment, there was only one thought left in her heart. She wanted revenge, and if she could not have it, she would accompany Yang Kai to the afterlife. A gorgeous trail of light lingered behind the enormous blue figure. With a few flickers, she arrived on the battlefield. However, a bizarre phenomenon occurred before she could unleash her strength. Ripples suddenly emerged in the originally calm space-time river. Following the splashing waves, a figure leapt out. Upon seeing the appearance of the figure, Su Yang froze in shock. Even the Ninth Order Masters behind her were dumbfounded by the sight. The figure who stepped out from the space-time river was none other than Yang Kai, who should have been killed by Mo earlier. He's alive. Everybody stared at the scene in front of them in disbelief. Their reactions were similar to when they watched Yang Kai being killed just now. He had clearly died right before their very eyes, and his death had not been an illusion. Nevertheless, he just walked out of the space-time river alive. The bizarre phenomenon was beyond their comprehension. This kind of resurrection after death was simply impossible. After stepping out from the surging waves, Yang Kai immediately noticed Su Yang and the others. He seemed to have anticipated the current situation and breathed out deeply. I'm glad I made it back in time. Step back. Su Yang, who had transformed into an ice phoenix, only hesitated for a brief moment before she turned around and retreated backwards. She also manipulated space principles and quickly transported the people behind her away from the battlefield. The Ninth Order Masters were forcefully returned to their previous positions. This location could barely be considered safe from the aftermath of the battle. Xiong Shan frowned deeply. What just happened? Yang Kai had clearly been killed, so how did he come back alive from the space-time river? Although Xiong Shan had lived for many years, he had never encountered such a bizarre sight before. A light flashed through Mi Jinglun's eyes. Creation realm. Could it be the mysteries of the creation realm? What do you mean? Oyu Yang Lai raised an eyebrow at those words. Are you saying that Yang Kai has stepped into the creation realm? Mi Jinglun shook his head. It doesn't seem like it. The Yang Kai who stepped out of the space-time river only had the aura of a Ninth Order Master. It did not seem as though he had ascended to a new realm. Be that as it may, Mi Jinglun had no other explanation for the bizarre phenomenon that they just witnessed. What's more, could reaching the creation realm really allow one to revive from the dead? It was simply outrageous and inconceivable. On the battlefield, Missouri watched Yang Kai reappear from the space-time river and turned to look at the scattered pieces of the dismembered body. After confirming that he had indeed slaughtered Yang Kai earlier, he immediately understood the situation. A shadow? Yang Kai smiled at Mo. I can't fool your eyes after all. Mu and Mo had lived together for such a long time. It was only natural for Mo to know about Mu's methods. Besides, two identical individuals could not exist together unless they originated from different spacetimes. Mu's shadow technique had transcended the limits of the mundane. In order to suppress and seal Mo's source, she had divided her entire life into 3,000 shadows to protect the 3,000 universe worlds inside her spacetime river. Each shadow represented a part of her past, an illusion of sorts that was also real and tangible. Yang Kai had obtained Mu's final gift. Devouring and refining her spacetime river had allowed him to massively increase the volume of his own spacetime river. At the same time, he also enhanced and improved his attainments and comprehension of the 10,000 grand Daos. The benefits he received were enormous. Nevertheless, those were not his greatest gains. The greatest benefit he obtained was Mu's shadow technique. That secret technique was definitely the pinnacle of the mysteries of the grand Daos. After fighting Mo, Yang Kai had deeply understood that he was no match for his opponent. That was because he could not overcome his limits and advance to a higher realm within a short time. As long as he could not advance to a higher realm, then his battle with Mo would only end with his defeat and death. Be that as it may, he could not afford to die. The human race would be doomed if he fell here. Since he had no means to advance to the next realm within a short time, his only chance of victory was to master Mu's shadow technique. Just 1 or 2 of him could not compete with Mo. But what about 3 of him? Or 5? Or 10? Mastering the mysterious shadow technique was Yang Kai's only chance at defeating Mo. Therefore, he had mainly been buying time during his previous fight with Mo so that he could integrate the many Dao strengths into his body completely. Mu had not been able to teach Yang Kai about the mystery behind the shadow technique. It was not that she had no intention to teach him the secret technique. On the contrary, it was a secret technique that resulted from reaching the pinnacle of the grand Daos, so it was not something he could learn even if she tried to teach him. The secret technique was something he had to comprehend with his own abilities. Fortunately, Yang Kai had embarked on the same path as Mu. It was for that reason she believed that he would eventually comprehend the mysterious secret technique and understand her intentions for giving him her spacetime river. Having come into contact with more than 2,000 of Mu's shadows, Yang Kai already had some vague ideas about the shadow technique before he devoured and refined Mu's spacetime river. Furthermore, Mu's final gift had laid down a solid foundation for him. It was thanks to the foundation that he finally understood the secrets of the shadow technique and was able to perform it through his spacetime river. There was no denying that Mo had killed him, but the one who died was a copy of himself who had existed at a certain time in the past. Nonetheless, the demise of a shadow was not without cost. Although it was Yang Kai's first time performing the shadow technique, he quickly noticed that something was wrong. He raised a hand to his head in confusion. It feels like I've forgotten something. He had completely lost his memories of the time during which the deceased shadow of him had existed. Never mind. It probably wasn't anything important. He gave a carefree laugh and looked up at Mo. Shall we go for round 2? Mo's lips curled upwards. His expression had been sullen throughout the battle with Yang Kai, as though he owed him a massive debt. He also repeatedly made rude and disparaging remarks, but he broke into a smile at this moment. Interesting. The interesting part has yet to come. As soon as the words left Yang Kai's mouth, the Dao strengths lingering around his body began to fluctuate. He arrived in front of Mo in the blink of an eye. The spacetime river surged behind him. Raising his arm, Yang Kai summoned the Azure Dragon Spear and thrust it at Mo. The Azure Dragon Spear should have been destroyed, but the Azure Dragon Spear in the spacetime that Yang Kai's shadow originated in remained intact. That was why the shattered spear could display its great strength once more. As before, the violent fallout produced by their exchange of blows continuously spread to the surroundings. The spectating Ninth Order Masters couldn't help widening their eyes at the sight. They secretly rejoiced that Yang Kai had resurrected in time. With their strength, Mo would have effortlessly killed them if they had rushed forward at the time. It was initially assumed that Yang Kai would be able to persist for a long time even though the battle was not evenly matched in strength. After all, he had displayed his immense strength previously. Unexpectedly, the battle only lasted for 4 hours before Mo found an opening and slammed his fist into Yang Kai's chest. A gaping hole appeared in Yang Kai's chest, then his body exploded into pieces. His aura also swiftly dwindled away into nothing. Despite knowing that he would not experience a true death, The Ninth Order Masters could not help being overwhelmed by sorrow at the sight. After eradicating young Kai's second shadow, Mo raised his eyes to look in the direction of the space-time river. He had lived with Mu for such a long time, so he was well aware of the shadow technique's strength. The true strength of the secret technique was not power, but the prominent ability to survive that was granted to the users of the secret technique. The shadow technique was created based on the space-time river, so the foundation of the secret technique was the space-time river itself. In order to completely eradicate a user of the shadow technique, the space-time river must first be destroyed, otherwise, the user of the shadow technique would never perish. For that reason, Mo immediately aimed for the space-time river as soon as he slaughtered young Kai's second shadow. Black ink strength around his body surged to cover the entire river. He planned to corrupt the entire space-time river with black ink strength in order to destroy young Kai's shadow technique. But before Mo could make a move, another of young Kai's shadow jumped out of the space-time river. Young Kai instantly summoned the Azure Dragon Spear and launched himself at Mo. He even made a mocking remark, "Why are you in such a hurry?" The two figures resumed their vicious battle once more. During that time, young Kai fought Mo while gathering various information on the shadow technique. It was his first time performing the secret technique, so his understanding of it was quite lacking. He had to perfectly master the secret technique as soon as possible because that was the only way he could turn the situation around and obtain victory. If he only relied on a never-ending series of battles via his shadows, he would never be able to defeat Mo. However, young Kai would need to make countless attempts and gain experience from actual practice to perfectly master the secret technique as soon as possible. "I've forgotten more things, but the memories I deliberately preserved have not been forgotten." "That's good news," young Kai quietly muttered to himself and resumed battle against Mo. Although he was no match for Mo still, he no longer needed to worry about death. That was why he could afford to act more recklessly than before. Shortly afterwards, young Kai gained another important piece of information: the shorter the span of spacetime allocated, the weaker the shadow's fighting ability. That is certainly worth noting. When that thought passed through his mind, the strength of his shadow faltered. Young Kai showed weaknesses in his defenses, so Mo instantly found an opening and slaughtered him. Blood rained all over the void. Despite witnessing similar scenes on several occasions already, the Ninth Order Masters watching the battle from afar still widened their eyes at the sight. What reassured them was that the next young Kai had already leapt out of the spacetime river almost as soon as the previous young Kai died. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5998, Contribution from the Future. Marshall Peak. One after another, young Kai's shadows stepped out from the spacetime river only to perish at Mo's hands. There were no exceptions. The first one had survived the battle for over 4 hours. The second one lasted for less than 4 hours. As for the third, the battle had ended even faster. This is bad. Among those who were watching the battle from a distance, Mi Jing Lun's expression turned solemn. He had noticed the issue at hand. It was an extremely serious issue. Although young Kai's shadows were endless in supply, his strength seemed to be weakening over time. It was as though time was flowing backwards for him, causing his condition to return to an earlier period with each shadow. At this moment, young Kai's aura was only comparable to a newly advanced Ninth Order Master. Hence, he was effortlessly slaughtered by Mo as soon as he stepped out from the spacetime river. If the situation continued in this manner, he would not even be able to maintain his cultivation in the Ninth Order. If that were to happen, Mo would be able to exterminate him without even breaking a sweat, no matter how many shadows were to appear. Another one of young Kai's shadows in the newly advanced Ninth Order stepped out from the spacetime river. Raising a hand, Mo captured the shadow in its grasp and stared at young Kai faintly. "You're a disgrace to Mu's legacy." Young Kai did not panic even though he was captured by Mo. After the repeated deaths of his shadows, he was now very familiar with the feeling of death. Raising an eyebrow at those words, he denied the statement. That might not be true. Mo looked surprised. "Do you have another trick up your sleeve?" Young Kai grinned. "Indeed, a trick you've never seen before." "Very good." Mo made a faint smile. While saying so, he exerted some strength into his grip and crushed the shadow in his grasp. In the next moment, another young Kai leapt out from the spacetime river. However, the aura lingering around him was different this time. Something had obviously changed, as his aura was once again at the peak of his strength. If the foundation of the shadow technique was said to be the space-time river, then the core of the secret technique was the user of the selected space-time. In Yang Kai's case, he was manipulating the 10,000 Dao strengths with his self from this space-time as the core and his space-time river as the foundation. That was how he gained the ability to summon shadows from previous space-time periods. All those who were slaughtered by Mo previously were his shadows. However, the one who walked out of the space-time river now was his main body. It was the him of the current space-time. The foundation and core were extremely important to the shadow technique, therefore, it was necessary to destroy both aspects to overcome it. Mo had initially wanted to refine the space-time river but was hindered by Yang Kai's numerous shadows, which prevented it from taking action. However, he saw a ray of hope when Yang Kai's main body emerged from the space-time river. The shadow technique would be destroyed as long as the Yang Kai standing before him was eliminated. But, could it be that simple? For Yang Kai's main body to emerge from the space-time river at this point. His actions certainly seemed like a desperate move. After all, the shadows that he summoned earlier had been cleanly eradicated. If he summoned any more shadows from earlier space-time periods, he would only have the cultivation of an 8th order master, which would not be able to cause any trouble for Mo at all. Combining the situation with what Yang Kai mentioned just now, Mo had the vague feeling that Yang Kai was about to reveal his trump card. Oddly enough, he found himself looking forward to what was to come for some reason. Yang Kai did not disappoint. When his main body stepped out of the space-time river, he lightly chanted, "I offer 1,000 years of my past in exchange for a contribution from the future. Come." As soon as those words left his mouth, the space-time river behind him began to rumble turbulently. The enormous river abruptly shrunk by a large margin, then another of Yang Kai's shadow emerged from within the waters. Seeing this, Mo's eyes narrowed slightly. That was because the aura lingering around this shadow was slightly stronger than Yang Kai himself. That should have been impossible. It had to be said that the shadow technique was performed with oneself in the current space-time as the core. For that reason, the summoned shadow could only be formed from oneself that existed in previous spacetimes. In other words, the summoned shadow should never be stronger than the main body, because the main body was ultimately the strongest. Be that as it may, an exception had appeared in Yang Kai's case. Mo instantly figured out the truth behind the situation and exclaimed in astonishment, "You summoned a shadow from the future." Only Yang Kai from the future could be stronger than the main body of Yang Kai, who existed in the current spacetime. Mo did not remain idle when he raised this question. After realizing that Yang Kai's attainments in the shadow technique had surpassed Mu's, he knew that Yang Kai could not be allowed to continue, so he charged forward even while asking this question. In response, Yang Kai just stood calmly in place. On the other hand, the summoned shadow stepped forward and immediately engaged in an intense battle with Mo. Although he came from 1,000 years in the future, his strength was still limited even though he was slightly stronger than the main body. He was no match for Mo either, but he would have no trouble buying some time for Yang Kai. Furthermore, Yang Kai did not need much time. He then shouted again, "Come." A second shadow stepped out from the spacetime river. It was another Yang Kai who came from another 1,000 years into the future. When the second shadow appeared, the size of the spacetime river shrunk again. On the other hand, the aura of Yang Kai and the two shadows instantly became closely interconnected. A three fortunes formation was established. The aura of the second shadow was again stronger than the first. The first shadow had been steadily pushed back by Mo's intense assault, but his situation improved as soon as the three fortunes formation was established, even though he remained at a disadvantage. Again, Yang Kai shouted. The dragon blood in his body boiled and churned, while at the same time, his face began to flush red. A third shadow stepped out from the spacetime river. Glancing at the main body, he nodded lightly before he directly charged onto the battlefield. The three fortunes formation also instantly transformed into the four symbols formation. Again, golden blood trickled out of Yang Kai's nose as a fourth shadow emerged, and the four symbols formation evolved into a five elements formation. Shadow after shadow emerged from the spacetime river without pause. Only when the eighth shadow was summoned did young Kai finally stop. It was not that he no longer wanted to continue, but rather that the volume of his spacetime river would shrink by a certain extent whenever he summoned a shadow from the future, and the spacetime river had vanished completely after he summoned the eighth shadow. He had reached the absolute limit of his shadow technique. At this moment, young Kai's main body was bleeding from all 7 of his orifices. It was evident that he had endured tremendous pressure in order to pull this feat off. The shadows that appeared towards the end possessed increasingly powerful auras. When the 6th shadow emerged, its aura had already reached the absolute peak of the 9th order. It was a stage that even young Kai's main body had not achieved. The 7th and the 8th shadows also had auras at the peak of the 9th order, but their auras had become even more profound. Looking at Mo, who was being besieged and steadily repelled by the shadows on the battlefield, young Kai smiled even though he was covered in blood. In truth, the shadows were already capable of fighting Mo on an equal footing when the 6 paths formation was formed. Therefore, Mo's situation then became more and more critical when it later evolved to become the 7 stars, 8 trigrams, and ultimately 9 palaces formation. The ones who established the battle formation were all young Kais. To be more precise, they were young Kais from future spacetimes. This was a feat that even Mu could not achieve. Her shadow technique could only summon shadows of her past because her spacetime river was incomplete, but that was not the case for young Kai. His spacetime river had been perfected, so the power of the shadow technique he wielded was even more terrifying. Martial Peak. Martial Peak, Chapter 5999, Clash of the Strongest, Martial Peak. Each shadow represented a young Kai from subsequent 1,000-year periods in the future. In other words, the 8 shadows represented 8,000 years worth of future spacetime. These 8 shadows combined with young Kai's main body to establish the 9 palaces formation. For that reason, the power of the battle formation was even greater than the 9 palaces formation formed between Zhong Ruoxi and her 8 personal guard. Zhong Ruoxi, who had harmonized the power of yin and yang with her Heaven's Order bloodline, was certainly stronger than any of young Kai's individual shadows. Be that as it may, the strength of the 8 personal guards had held her back. Taking the overall situation into account, young Kai's 9 palaces formation was undoubtedly the strongest 9 palaces formations that had appeared on the battlefield. Moreover, the difference in strength was significant. After establishing the 9 palaces formation, young Kai's main body took a step forward and charged towards Mo with the combined strength of the other 8 shadows. The 6 paths formation was already sufficient for young Kai to fight Mo on even terms, so the 7 stars formation and 8 trigrams formations had left Mo at a complete disadvantage. At this moment, young Kai was practically invincible thanks to the 9 palaces formation. With the combined forces of the main body and 8 shadows, Mo was powerless against their intense assault. Black blood and black ink strength splattered everywhere. The 9 young Kais moved around swiftly, each one of them having mastered the 10,000 grand Daos. As they were shadows of young Kai himself, there was no need for them to worry about their cooperation. The connection between the shadows was so close and firm that there were no flaws in their movements at all. Mo naturally wanted to break free, but it was not easy to escape the besiegement of the battle formation. The 9th Order Masters watching the battle from afar were stunned. Nobody could have imagined that such a strange scene would appear during the final battle. The mysteries of the shadow technique had exceeded their comprehension and imagination. Looking at the current situation, they couldn't help feeling hopeful and excited. That was because they finally saw a glimpse of hope in defeating Mo. In the past, the issue of defeating Mo had always been a plague to the human race. Although they never deliberately avoided the topic, the reality was that they simply did not have sufficient means or strength to oppose Mo. Zhong Ruoxi's support had certainly been a pleasant surprise. Unfortunately, even she was not strong enough to compete with Mo in battle. The battle on the main battlefield was over, and the entire Black Ink clan had been obliterated. If young Kai could defeat Mo, then the Black Ink crisis that had been plaguing the human race since the late ancient era would be resolved in one fell swoop. A bright future was awaiting the human race. The light would eventually expunge all darkness. However, the veteran 9th Order Masters soon began to look worried. The current situation might be favorable for them, But nobody knew what price Yang Kai had paid to wield the shadow technique like this. Seeing as the secret technique far exceeded his own abilities, the price he paid would correspond to the strength he obtained. In other words, the greater the strength Yang Kai obtained, the greater the price he had to pay. Furthermore, they did not know how long he could persevere in such an intense battle. The truth was just as they feared. Yang Kai had indeed paid an unimaginable price to wield the shadow technique in such a fashion. His body was also forced to bear the incredible pressure that came from obtaining strength that exceeded his own abilities. In other words, he could not maintain this state for long. He had to finish this battle as soon as possible, and for that reason, he did not hesitate to join the battle himself just to defeat Mo a little faster. Mo was steadily being pushed back under the suppression of the Nine Palaces formation. At this point, he was backed into a corner with no ability to fight back. The vexing situation infuriated Mo. As the ancient supreme being, he was a master who not only originated from the same era as Mu, but also once held the opportunity to reign over the entire universe. Even if more than 30% of his source had been suppressed and sealed, he could still not tolerate a junior acting so presumptuously in front of him, especially when this particular junior had stolen Mu's final legacy from him. Amid the intense battle, Mo abruptly turned to look in a certain direction and fixed his gaze on one of Yang Kai's figures. Naturally, it was Yang Kai's main body. The main body was easy to identify. Not only was the aura of the main body the weakest among the other shadows, but the appearance of the main body was also the most disheveled and worse for wear due to the effects of performing the shadow technique. To break the shadow technique, it was necessary to either destroy the space-time river that acted as the foundation or the main body that acted as the core. At this moment, the space-time river was nowhere to be seen because it had been evenly divided between Yang Kai's 8 shadows. In that case, Mo only had one option left. Mo turned to face the storm of attacks coming from so many shadows and disregarded the injuries he sustained, even when the strongest shadow chopped off his arm. In the end, the heavy price he paid was worthwhile indeed. He successfully broke out of the encirclement created by the shadows and arrived in front of Yang Kai's main body. Black ink strength surged. Raising his remaining hand, Mo blasted his fist at Yang Kai. The punch was quite a distance away from Yang Kai. Nevertheless, the force of the punch was enough to cause space to shatter, time to stop, and the universe to collapse. The blow containing Mo's full strength could not be dodged or avoided. Mo could almost see Yang Kai's main body being smashed into paste, and a hint of triumph flashed through the fury in his eyes, but unexpectedly, the imagined scene did not appear. Despite the incoming blow, Yang Kai's main body did not show the slightest trace of panic. On the contrary, he stepped forward and threw himself in the direction of the blow. Mo was stunned by the strange turn of events. Meanwhile, Yang Kai's main body suddenly unleashed a burst of power that far exceeded his own strength. The force directly penetrated the shackles of space and caused the stagnant time to flow again. Then, he punched out at the same time. Damn it! Mo abruptly realized that he had fallen into a trap. For a long time now, the core of the Nine Palaces formation had always been sustained by the strongest shadow. Nevertheless, the fact that Yang Kai's main body could exert such a powerful burst of strength indicated that the core of the Nine Palaces formation could be transferred to the main body. The method to break the shadow technique was to defeat the body which existed in the current spacetime. That was something both Mo and Yang Kai knew. Seeing as the former was bound to target the main body, how could the latter not take precautions? It could even be said that Yang Kai had been waiting for this very moment. A violent force swept out, pushing Mo's figure backwards. In the meantime, the 8 shadows attacked from all directions. Dao strengths fluctuated wildly, and the barrage of attacks left Mo staggering from the impact. If that were all, Mo's situation would have been bad enough. However, each of the 8 shadows actually exerted strength that far exceeded their limits with every blow that they unleashed. The position as core of the formation was constantly being transferred around. To be precise, the position as core was instantly transferred to whichever shadow was attacking Mo at the time. Such a feat would have been impossible to achieve if it was any other configuration for the makeup of the battle formation, but Yang Kai could freely transfer the position as core between his main body and his shadows without any obstruction. This was the same strategy that Zhongruo she had carried out previously. She and her 8 personal guard had both been the cause and not the cause at the same time. Such a perfect 9 palaces formation could be said to have no flaws whatsoever. More importantly, there was no need to fear the weak links being targeted. In fact, there was only one method to destroy this battle formation, which was to totally annihilate it by brute force. The biggest reason why Zhongruo she had been defeated by Mo was that her personal guard could not withstand the intensity and ferocity of the battle. Transferring the core position to her personal guard was a huge burden on their bodies. Each time they became the core, they would also suffer heavy damage from the pressure, hence, there was a risk of their bodies collapsing after numerous transfers. The same was also true for Yang Kai. In fact, the burden was greatest on his main body. The main body had already been greatly weakened after performing the shadow technique. With the addition of the pressure from being the core of the formation, he couldn't help vigorously coughing up blood, his complexion turning as pale as a sheet. Be that as it may, he did not hesitate in the slightest. Taking full advantage of the opening created by the 8 shadows who were besieging Mo, Yang Kai stepped forward and approached Mo's arm that had been severed earlier. Although the arm was bleeding profusely, it was not a fully physical body part. Open. Yang Kai raised his arm and pointed at the arm. His divine sense surged turbulently. A moment later, a huge set of doors suddenly appeared in front of him. The door opened slightly to reveal a small gap, and then an indescribable pulling force seeped out from within and devoured the entire severed arm. This arm contained part of Mo's source. Previously, some 30% of Mo's source had been suppressed and sealed by Yang Kai with the help of the profound source gate. If Yang Kai could not suppress and seal this piece of Mo's source quickly, the opportunity to retrieve his severed arm and reabsorb the piece of his source he had lost would remain. Once Mo did so, he would return to full strength again. Now that this piece of his source had been sealed, Mo's aura dropped significantly. Although black ink strength surged at the spot where his arm had been severed and formed a new limb in the blink of an eye, the power that had been suppressed and sealed could no longer return. With the success of this attack, Yang Kai's confidence increased tremendously. This was the first crucial step towards victory. It was also the hardest and most dangerous step in the entire process. This step had paved the way for the rest of the path, making what came next easier. Retrieving the profound source gate, Yang Kai turned around and charged towards Mo. The furious battle resumed once more. The secret that the position as core of the 9 palaces formation could be freely transferred between the shadows had already been exposed, therefore, Yang Kai had no reason to hide his movements anymore. Dao's strengths fluctuated violently around him, and his offensive grew increasingly vicious. Mo was already no match for Yang Kai when the 9 palaces formation was formed, so now that he had lost a part of his source, his situation worsened even more. After a brief but intense battle, one of Yang Kai's shadows found an opening and chopped off one of Mo's arms again. Mo immediately attempted to retrieve his severed arm, but Yang Kai was already prepared for such an opportunity in advance. In the end, Mo was incapable of extricating himself from the battle due to the constant assault by the various shadows. Yang Kai's main body swiftly approached the severed arm, and for the second time, he summoned the profound source gate and devoured the source piece. After completing his task, Yang Kai coughed up another mouthful of blood. He raised his head and glanced at the battlefield. Perceiving the condition of his shadows, he knew that he could not persist for much longer. His main body was not the only one who was severely wounded by now, the rest of the shadows were also in a similar condition. However, only a small portion of these wounds were caused by Mo. Most of them had come from carrying the burden of being the 9 palaces formation core. Yang Kai's immense strength and heritage had allowed him to bear an unimaginable amount of pressure from being the core. That was only possible because it was him. If it were any other 9th Order master instead, they would not have been able to withstand the pressure after being a core 3 times in such a situation, regardless of their strength. I have to end this as quickly as possible, Yang Kai muttered under his breath. Then, he stepped forward and joined the battlefield. In the next moment, his strongest shadow took on the boundless pressure from being the core and unleashed a continuous storm of attacks without care whether his body could withstand the burden or not. Mo clearly faltered under the violent bombardment of the strongest shadow. While Mo was busy stewing in rage, the strongest shadow threw himself forward and disregarded Mo's counterattack to restrain Mo firmly. At such a close distance, he grinned at Mo and revealed a sinister row of fangs. Mo immediately understood Yang Kai's intentions. Roaring furiously, he desperately struggled to escape. However, the attacks that came blasting from all directions rained down on Mo and the shadow the next moment. Even the strongest shadow could not withstand this barrage of attacks. Thus, he exploded and disintegrated completely. Likewise, Mo's body was battered from the attack. The left part of his body was gone, revealing the internal organs within his abdomen cavity. Mo staggered backwards weakly, a strange light flashing through his eyes for a moment. Before he could do anything though, another shadow charged towards him. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 6000. Many thanks, Marshall Peak. The strongest shadow had already been shattered, and with that, the 9 palaces formation had also been reduced to the 8 trigrams formation, which significantly reduced its might. At the same time, Mo's aura was not as strong as before. After 2 pieces of his source were sealed by Yang Kai, his aura had been notably weakened. As the remaining 7 shadows attacked Mo, Yang Kai's main body summoned the profound source gate for a 3rd time, suppressing and sealing another piece of Mo's shattered body. Mo's aura weakened once again. The 8 trigrams formation was now sufficient to deal with the current Mo. A series of fearsome attacks struck back the battle formation, destroying another of Yang Kai's shadows. In exchange, Mo once again suffered heavy injuries. The 8 trigrams formation had been reduced to the 7 stars formation. Previously, Yang Kai's shadows had emerged from the spacetime river one after another, joining the battle formation and making it stronger, but the situation had reversed now. As more of these shadows perished, the might of the battle formation also began to weaken. The only benefit was that Mo also weakened. Each time a shadow perished, Mo's body would shatter and Yang Kai's main body would seize the opportunity to suppress and seal another piece of the former's source. In the end, all of the shadows disappeared, leaving Yang Kai bleeding all over, staring right across at a miserable and weakened Mo. The current Mo had a large amount of his source suppressed and sealed, which significantly decreased his strength. He was no longer as mighty as before, and even the rich and dense black ink strength lingering around him was now extremely faint, almost invisible. The current Mo had lost more than 90% of his source. In other words, he only had 10% of his peak strength, which was far from prime condition. Right then, several figures flew over and formed a circle, surrounding the battlefield. They were the human race masters who had been watching from afar, as well as the giant spiritual gods Rda and Ra. Previously, it was impossible for them to intervene in the battle. Even the 2 giant spiritual gods were unable to approach, let alone the 9th Order masters. However, as Mo's strength suffered with the destruction of Yang Kai's shadows again and again, the spectating masters finally had a chance to be useful. Mo had lost. It was simply impossible for him to deal with so many masters with his current strength. Just the 2 giant spiritual gods alone were enough to overpower him now. Nonetheless, Mo was laughing, his voice sounding extremely cheerful. Zhong Ruo, she stood before Yang Kai with the Heaven's Order sword in her hand, vigilantly staring at Mo. Although Mo was in a miserable state right now, no one knew what kind of methods this ancient being still had hidden up his sleeve. As such, they still had to take necessary precautions. Yang Kai. Mo's smile faded as it shouted at Yang Kai, "Let's settle this." Behind Zhong Ruo, Yang Kai calmed his roiling vitality and replied, "Good, sir." Zhong Ruo, she shouted, "Allow me." She still had the strength to launch one last attack and was confident that she could take down Mo with it, so she naturally wouldn't let Yang Kai take the risk. "No. There's no need." Yang Kai stepped forward and walked past Zhong Ruo, staring at the nearby Mo. Even as victory was within his grasp, there was no trace of the pride or arrogance on Yang Kai's face as a victor should have, rather there was only a complicated expression. "None of you is to interfere," Yang Kai gently ordered. The gathered masters furrowed their brows ever so slightly. In the current situation, the best course of action was undoubtedly to attack together and take down Mo in an instant, ending this disaster that had lasted for millions of years once and for all. However, Yang Kai actually told them not to interfere. No one knew what Yang Kai was thinking or up to. However, out of their trust in Yang Kai, everyone still acquiesced to his demand. Be that as it may, they still maintained their encirclement and focused their auras. If anything happened to Yang Kai, Mo would immediately be attacked from all directions. When dealing with Mo, there was no need to discuss honor or morals. Despite being surrounded on all sides, Mo's expression still remained calm. He simply stared at Yang Kai and shouted, "Come." As soon as he spoke, his figure rushed straight towards Yang Kai, leaving a streak of black light behind him. Simultaneously, Yang Kai also charged towards Mo. The moment the two figures collided, everyone's hearts jumped to their throats. However, the next thing that entered their sight left them relieved. Yang Kai's fist had smashed into Mo's chest, while Mo's fist had stopped right before Yang Kai's head. *PU*. Mo spurted a mouthful of black blood as his raised fist limply fell. Standing at arm's length from one another, when their eyes suddenly met, Mo smiled at Yang Kai. "Many thanks." Yang Kai nodded to him, and thought for a moment before adding, "I will let you see the world Mu wished for you to see." Despite the jet-black blood flowing from the corners of Mo's mouth, a free and relieved expression appeared on his face after hearing this. "Then, that's enough." Yang Kai didn't say anything more and summoned the profound source gate. As the gate cracked open, it swallowed Mo whole. Right afterwards, the door slowly closed itself, sealing the endless darkness behind it. Back then, it was Mu who had rescued Mo from behind this door, and after more than 1,000,000 years, Yang Kai had sent him back through it. This ancient being had lived his life. He did not dare say he didn't have any regrets, but at the very least, his life had certainly been quite an exciting one. *PU*. Yang Kai spurted a mouthful of blood before sitting down cross-legged, taking out a handful of pills from his space ring and stuffing them into his mouth. Everyone immediately rushed to him upon seeing this. Su Yang flew straight behind Yang Kai and sat down, allowing him to lean on her. After a while, Yang Kai's chaotic aura finally started to stabilize. As he opened his eyes, he saw many pairs of eyes gazing at him with worried looks. "I won't die," Yang Kai comforted everyone, allowing them to relax. Jing Lun finally couldn't hold back his curiosity and asked, "Why did you thank Mo at the last moment?" Although no one heard Yang Kai's words of thanks, they could tell what he was saying by reading Yang Kai's lips. Yang Kai heaved a sigh, explaining, "From beginning to end, Mo never went all out." "What?" Ouyang Lai was shocked. "He didn't go all out? How is that possible?" The others also had a look of incredulity on their faces. To their surprise, their battle almost ended in mutual destruction even when Yang Kai had given it everything he had. Did that mean Mo would have obtained the final victory if he had not held back? Yang Kai continued, "It's not that Mo didn't use his full strength, but rather that he didn't resort to any of his other tricks. Yang Kai had always been on guard against certain methods. The Royal Lords had their Royal Lord secret technique, which could instantly corrupt Eighth Order masters. As the Black Ink clan's creator, how could Mo not have similar methods? What's more, such a method when used by Mo would surely be far more profound than what a Royal Lord could produce. Of course, Yang Kai had the soul-warming lotus protecting his soul, and the World Tree clone protecting his small universe, but even so, he could not say with absolute certainty that they would be able to defend against such a move. Kang once mentioned that a mere clone could not completely negate Mo's black ink strength, only the World Tree itself would be capable of that. So, when Yang Kai fought with Mo, he had always been on guard. But from beginning to end, Mo had not used that mysterious method. Was it that Mo couldn't? Impossible. He just didn't want to. Even after Yang Kai summoned his 8 shadows, Mo still held a trump card that could have instantly turned the tables. Furthermore, he never needed to fight Yang Kai head-on, he could have just stalled for time, and the 8 shadows from the future spacetimes would slowly have dissipated. Not to mention, there was even a decent chance Mo could have broken away from the 9 Palaces formation's blockade and escaped. At the very least, it was clear Mo had no such intention. From beginning to end, he had fought with Yang Kai head-on. At first glance, it seemed like Mo wanted to kill Yang Kai, no matter the cost, but was that really the case? Therefore, although Mo had been fighting with all his strength against Yang Kai, he had not truly gone all out. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 6001, Price, Marshall Peak. This was the reason why young Kai thanked Mo in the end. I'm afraid this is the end he wanted. Mu had protected the human race and the universe for countless years, and even after her death, she had left behind many contingencies and hidden hands. Although the world was in ruins and the human race were like ants to Mo, it was still what Mu wanted to protect. Under the premise that the world had someone else strong enough to protect it, Mo was willing to go along with Mu's will. Of course, if young Kai didn't have the necessary strength, Mo wouldn't mind killing him. In that case, Mo would have still set aside a great territory for the human race to live and multiply after he dominated the entire universe. This way, the human race wouldn't be wiped out and he would have a reasonable explanation for Mu. At the end of the day, Mo was not inherently evil. In the late ancient era, he had even protected the human race and took it upon himself to help them gain their freedom. If it weren't for him and the 10 martial ancestors working together, the human race of that era would not have been able to defeat the early ancient era's great monsters. It was just that he was unable to control his gradually growing power and eventually lost his way, especially after Mu's demise. When she died, no one was able to restrain him anymore. Today's ending was something Mo himself probably sought from the start. Everyone sunk into silence after listening to young Kai's explanation of what truly happened, as what Mu would want others to know. Their current feelings were tough to describe. Mo's life might have been filled with misery, but he was still the one who had brought about the pain and suffering of the human race for millions of years. Had there been no Mo, the human race would have ruled the world unchallenged after defeating the early ancient era's great monsters. There would not have been a war that lasted for so many eons. The Black Ink disaster had caused unimaginable losses to the human race, with countless elites having sacrificed their lives to bring it to an end. As far as the human race was concerned, no matter how miserable Mo's life had been, it was an irrefutable fact that he was the human race's greatest enemy. As the adage goes, the winner is the king, and the loser is the villain. Catcher. Suddenly, it sounded as if something had cracked. Everyone promptly turned to look at the source, and was immediately shocked. Big brother, young Shui called out, staring at young Kai's face in horror. Everyone also looked serious as a crack appeared on young Kai's face. It was not a normal wound, and neither was young Kai bleeding from it. After the first crack, another one appeared soon after, and then another, and another. They were not just on young Kai's face, but on his hands as well. The current young Kai looked like a piece of porcelain that was on the verge of shattering, and everyone could feel fearsome Dao's strength seeping from these cracks. Young Kai looked down at his hands and muttered to himself, "It came faster than I expected." He seemed to have anticipated his current situation. "What's happening?" Su Yang asked from behind him, her tender body uncontrollably trembling. After so many years of struggle, Mo was finally defeated and the Black Ink disaster was resolved. The future belonged to the human race, and it was foreseeable that the world would become a far better place. Young Kai was the biggest contributor in the final battle, but at this moment, his entire body was shrouded in an inexplicable crisis. Everyone could not help but be nervous. What was even more disturbing was that no one had ever seen such injuries before. Young Kai gently patted the back of Su Yang's hand, comforting her. "I won't die, but I don't have much time left." "What does that mean?" Xiao Xiao asked. How should I put it? Everyone around him was worried to death, but young Kai, the main person involved, remained completely calm and composed. The shadow technique was created by Mu with the space-time river as its foundation. I inherited her legacy and walked the same path as her, so naturally I can also use this secret technique. However, Mu's space-time river was incomplete, so her shadow technique was actually incomplete. She could only summon shadows from the past, and once those shadows dispersed, the memories of that period would also disappear. On the other hand, I have perfected this secret technique and can summon shadows from the future. Each shadow I summoned in the battle just now was from 1,000 years in my future. Now that the shadows have already been destroyed, I must pay the price. The more powerful a secret technique was, the harder it was to use it. The shadow technique was undoubtedly the most powerful secret technique that had ever appeared in this world, especially since young Kai had surpassed his predecessor and used it to defeat Mo. The price he had to pay would definitely not be small either. Once the shadows of the past are destroyed, the memories of the corresponding past will also disappear. So, what kind of price do you have to pay when your future shadow is destroyed? Mi Jinglun asked solemnly. I won't exist in those periods in the future. You won't exist? What do you mean? Although I can't explain it clearly, you can think of it as a literal statement. Mi Jinglun was silent for a moment, digesting this unbelievable news. You summoned 8 shadows, so does that mean 8,000 years of your future just disappeared? Indeed. What happens after 8,000 years? Yang Kai shook his head. I have no idea. After all, this was the first time he had used the shadow technique, so although he knew that he would cease to exist for the next 8,000 years, all traces of his existence would be erased by the space-time Tao strength of the universe. He couldn't say for certain what would happen after that. How could this be? Yang Shui's eyes turned red. It's not a big problem, I should be able to return after 8,000 years, Yang Kai comforted. Despite his assurance, everyone could hear the uncertainty in his voice. His back suddenly became lighter as Su Yang suddenly left. She returned soon after, but this time she brought Yu Meng and the others with her. The eyes of all the women turned red as they tried to hold back their grief, preventing their tears from rolling down. Su Yang had already briefed everyone of the situation, so they knew the crisis Yang Kai was about to encounter. In the short time Su Yang was not there though, further cracks had appeared on Yang Kai and the leakage of Tao strengths had become more and more obvious. Yang Kai really didn't have much time left, and the backlash from the shadow technique was even stronger than he had imagined. Mi Jinglun shot a glance at the crowd, whereupon everyone apart from Yang Kai's close relatives retreated to the side. The women who had been brought here by Su Yang finally couldn't hold it in any further and burst into tears. In the end, it was Yu Meng who acted like the big sister of the family and managed to compose herself first. Before she could say anything more though, the skin on Yang Kai's face began to peel off and disappear. Even though they were all 8th and 9th order masters now, there was nothing they could do. Everyone held back their grief as they helplessly watched Yang Kai's figure gradually vanish. At the very last moment, Yu Meng shouted at Yang Kai, "You heartless bastard. Mark my words, if you don't come back after 8,000 years, I'll take my sisters and marry someone else." Yang Kai gave her a smile. This sounds so familiar. Yu Meng's will finally shattered, and she broke into tears. She tightly grabbed Yang Kai's hand, and begged, "You must come back. You must." Yang Kai swept his gaze over all of them one by one, as if he wanted to imprint their faces into the depths of his soul, before gently nodding and assuring, "Of course." Right then, scattered specks of light emerged before an enormous river spanning across the void appeared, enveloping Yang Kai. Soon after, an enormous wave came crashing down on him, swallowing him into the river. The river slowly disappeared, and so did Yang Kai along with it, leaving behind a group of women standing there in a daze, their endless sorrow flowing like a river. "Something's not right," Mi Jinglun, who was watching from afar, suddenly whispered before turning to Xiong Shan. "Do you feel it?" Xiong Shan nodded his agreement. "There's something wrong." The other 9th Order Masters more or less felt the same way. Although they couldn't figure out what exactly was wrong, 9th Order Masters were extremely perceptive. Their senses were so sharp that even just a slight disparity around them would arouse their suspicion. Everyone made their respective probes, but none of them were able to find anything amiss. Unable to find anything wrong, they had no choice but to put this matter aside, but they still maintained a certain degree of vigilance. The curtain of the final battle had already fallen. The Allied army had finished off the Black Ink Clan army, while Mo had been completely sealed by Yang Kai. Although the greatest contributor had suffered severe backlash from his secret technique and had his existence wiped out by space and time for the next 8,000 years, when all was said and done, the victory needed to be publicized. When Mi Jinglun and the others returned and spread the news that Mo had been ended, the human race army of millions that had been waiting here all cheered and danced in joy. The war that had been going on for millions of years had finally come to an end. Now, all under the heavens belonged to the human race. After the battle, the casualties were counted and the aftermath was dealt with in an orderly manner. The small stone race army had already withdrawn and returned to the chaotic dead territory through the void corridor. The human race also began their withdrawal half a month later. The void corridor created by Zhong Ruo saved the human race a lot of time. Not everyone left, however. Headed by Su Yang and Yu Yu Meng, Yang Kai's wives, his disciples, Yang Shui, Yang Xiao, and several others all stayed behind. They remained in the place where Yang Kai had disappeared, quietly waiting for his return. The next 8,000 years would definitely be very dull and long, but so long as they could see Yang Kai the moment he returned, any amount of waiting would be worth it. A fleet of dilapidated warships entered the chaotic dead territory through the void corridor. The current Zhong Ruo could still somehow maintain the balance of yin and yang in her body, so the chaotic dead territory was now a safe place. Be that as it may, she couldn't maintain this state for much longer. In order to fight Mo and kill the royal lords, she had burned too much of her Heaven's Order bloodline. Once the human race army left the chaotic dead territory, she would break the harmony with the two. At that time, Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan would reappear, and Zhong Ruo would lose her previous strength. At the end of the day, if she didn't have her Heaven's Order bloodline that could maintain the harmony of yin and yang, she would just be a Ninth Order master. The fleet passed through the chaotic dead territory and soon returned to the 3,000 worlds. Many years ago, when the human race army first set off from the star boundary, they had some 30 million soldiers, but now, only slightly more than 10 million remained. Around 60% of the soldiers had died in this final war. Despite the terrible losses, compared to the solemn and miserable atmosphere they had when they first set out, everyone was high in spirits, and every warship was buzzing with cheers and laughter, despite the sad state of the army. On a certain purifying black ink warship that was so wrecked that it looked like it would fall apart at any moment, Jing Lun was standing at the bow with Xiong Shan beside him. The two calmly listened to the hustle and bustle on the other warships and exchanged a knowing glance. The human race has won, but the greatest contributor is unable to celebrate with us. It's quite regretful, Jing Lun couldn't help but lament. Xiong Shan nodded his agreement. Now that I think about it, had he not forced those peace treaties with the Black Ink clan, the human race wouldn't have been able to accumulate enough strength. That's right, Jing Lun nodded. By the looks of it, that treaty was an important turning point in the rise of the human race. What was that treaty called? What's it called again? The two Ninth Order masters glanced at each other before the smiles on their faces slowly faded away, gradually replaced by solemn looks. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 6002, Response, Marshall Peak. While the millions of human race soldiers were making the trek back home, all the Ninth Order masters gathered aboard the only intact purifying black ink warship remaining. Compared to their peak, the number of Ninth Order masters had undoubtedly decreased significantly, with many of the recently advanced Ninth Order masters having perished in the battle. Only 20 or so had managed to survive. Apart from the Ninth Order masters, Fu Guang was also invited. Everyone took their seats. Most of them were still injured, their auras weak and unstable. The battle ended not that long ago, and even with the recuperative abilities of Ninth Order masters, it was impossible for them to fully recover in such a short time, especially since the human race was running low on supplies, especially recovery pills. One by one, the Ninth Order masters noticed the heavy air. They might not have an idea as to why Supreme Commander Mi had gathered all of them together, but they could tell that bad news was in store for them from his expression. After the last Ninth Order master took their seat, Jing Lun finally started addressing the crowd. I've summoned you here today to confirm something. He looked around, paused for a moment, then recounted his conversation with Xiong Shan. When the Ninth Order masters heard this, some were confused, some were lost in thought, and a few who realized the issue right away furrowed their brow. Oyu Yang Lai casually asked, "What's there to fret about with your conversation with Big Head Xiong?" He did not find anything wrong, it sounded just a normal chat to him. "There's a big problem." Jing Lun stared at him with a solemn expression, causing Oyu Yang Lai to realize the gravity of the situation, despite not understanding what was the problem. Xiong Shan explained, "The peace treaty we signed with the Black Ink clan back then was of paramount importance and could be said to be the turning point in the entire war. It is impossible for Brother Mi and I to forget the details of such an important matter. It would have been nothing if it was just one of us having a hard time recalling certain trivial points of the treaty, but the problem is that neither of us can remember them. When we were discussing the treaty, both of us were unable to immediately recall even some of the basic details of the agreement. That should be absolutely impossible. Young Lai speculated, frowning, maybe you're too tired from the battle? Xiong Shan focused his gaze on him. Do you remember the first time you met young Kai? Of course I remember, Young Lai replied readily. How could I forget such a thing? At that time, he slowly stopped talking. Obviously, he too had noticed the problem as his expression changed and a furrow appeared on his brow. Xiong Shan then turned to the other Ninth Order Masters and asked, everyone, why don't you try recalling your encounters with young Kai, or some common knowledge about him? The Ninth Order Masters complied. Soon, a bewildered look took over everyone's face. Observing everyone's expressions, Young Lai immediately understood that they too had encountered the same situation as him. He could not help but mumble, how is this possible? When Xiong Shan asked him to, Young Lai attempted to recall the first time he met young Kai, but he actually couldn't immediately remember it. It was as if his memory was blocked by an invisible barrier. It was right on the tip of his tongue, but he couldn't enunciate it for some reason. After struggling for a few breaths, he finally remembered that the first time he met young Kai was outside Great Evolution Pass. At that time, Young Lai was on a scouting mission with his disciples, and young Kai arrived to meet him under Xiong Shan's orders. At that time, young Kai was only a 7th Order Master. Jing Lun's voice sounded in everyone's ears, it's not just you. After Brother Xiong and I discovered this problem, we ordered our men to ask the soldiers the same questions, and they too encountered the same situation. Regardless of whether they personally met with young Kai or simply heard stories about him, they were unable to immediately recall the details. What caused this phenomenon? Wu Qing asked in a low voice. He had just tried to recall things about young Kai, and it was indeed as Jing Lun had described. I don't know the exact reason, but I'm certain it has something to do with his shadow technique, Jing Lun continued. Everyone should remember that young Kai said that the 8 shadows were summoned from the next 8,000 years. He also said that because those 8 shadows were destroyed, it meant that he would not exist for the next 8,000 years. Everyone nodded in acknowledgement as all of them were present when Jing Lun and young Kai were discussing this. Young Kai said that it was the price he paid to use the shadow technique, but now it seems that young Kai himself had underestimated the severity of this price. He thought that the price he had to pay would be to disappear for the next 8,000 years, but in reality, some kind of invisible force is slowly erasing all traces of his existence from this world. So, anything related to him would slowly become blurred in the memories of others. Is such a thing really possible? Young Lai found it hard to believe the most direct way one would think that removing the traces of a person's existence in this world meant was to kill that person, but the elimination that everyone encountered now was no longer as simple as just killing young Kai, even their memories of him were being lost. Jing Lun added, before young Kai used the shadow technique, even I hadn't expected for such a bizarre secret technique to exist. Young Lai immediately fell silent. The mysteries of the shadow technique were beyond their comprehension, so the price for using it was also unfathomable. As such, no matter how unbelievable Jing Lun's speculations were, there was indeed a possibility they were true. This is just the beginning. What I'm worried about is we might even forget everything about young Kai with time. All of the Ninth Order Masters were shocked. As the greatest hero who led the human race to victory and defeated Mo, young Kai should be remembered for all generations, but if the human race were to completely forget about him, that would truly be a tragic misfortune. What will happen if we completely forget about young Kai? Jing Lun asked. No one could answer. He didn't ask any more, and instead postulated, before disappearing, young Kai said that he would return after 8,000 years, but even he did not sound certain of that. So, he might be able to return, or he might completely disappear. Right now, the traces of his existence are slowly being erased, which is akin to him disappearing. If one day everyone completely forgets about him, perhaps he might never appear again. Fu Guang, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke, Supreme Commander do you mean to say that if many people in this world remember him and his fame remains widespread, Perhaps it can help him return? Mi Jing Lun shook his head. I'm not sure, but it is possible. Then, it's worth a shot. Fu Guang nodded. However, the most important thing right now is to investigate the speed at which his traces are being erased. Only by confirming this matter can we make appropriate arrangements. Agreed. Agreed. We'll do as Supreme Commander Mi says. After many days of investigation by Ninth Order Masters and questioning thousands of randomly selected soldiers, everyone reached an unfortunate conclusion. The speed at which Yang Kai's traces were being erased was increasing. More and more things related to Yang Kai were being forgotten. At this rate, everything related to Yang Kai would be completely gone in short order. By then, no one in this world would remember that there was once a hero who had saved the entire human race. Mi Jing Lun couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. He immediately sent people back to the original location of the primordial heavens source Grand Restriction to inform Su Yang and the others who were staying there. Although Su Yang and the others would most likely notice this on their own, it was always better to be prepared. An advanced team had already been sent back to relay the news of their victory to the human race forces in the rear, so a joyful mood was already spreading. When the army returned, they were naturally received with warmth and celebration. The human race army had suffered heavy casualties in this battle, losing more than 60% of its soldiers. Be that as it may, it was all worth it, as in the future, the world would no longer face the threat of black ink strength. But contrary to the expectations of everyone who had remained behind, the Crusade force showed no signs of celebrating after their return. Instead, they quickly dispersed as if there was a new mission waiting for them. Soon, great statues were erected in the Star Boundary, Myriad Monsters world, and everywhere else the human race lived, whether it was a village, a town, or a city. The statue depicted a brave and heroic man wielding a long spear that seemed to have a dragon coiling around it. This man seemed to be staring down an invisible enemy, confronting them in battle. At the base of the statue was Yang Kai's name. Meanwhile, Mi Jing Lun entered High Heaven Palace, and with the cooperation of Hua Qing Sai and Xia Ning Chang, gathered all the people who had close relationships with Yang Kai. Afterwards, under Mi Jing Lun's supervision, they jointly wrote a biography. Naturally, it was Yang Kai's biography, and it included all the big and small matters that had happened in his life. There were no excessively embellished accounts in it, just the simple and factual descriptions. Nonetheless, anyone who read this biography would understand how magnificent Yang Kai's life was. Everyone would come to know that in the darkest era of the human race, it was he who tore through the darkness and brought a bright ray of hope to them. They would also come to know that Yang Kai had ultimately paid a huge price to finally defeat the ancient being named Mo and end the war between the two races that had lasted for millions of years. Most importantly, they would know that the world could not forget him. Otherwise, he would never be able to return. After this biography was written, countless copies of it were made by High Heaven Palace disciples and distributed to all the places where the human race lived, especially the places where Yang Kai's statue was erected. The Ninth Order Masters even personally placed these jade slips containing Yang Kai's biography into the statues. This way, as long as someone examined the statue, they would be able to immediately perceive the contents of the jade slip and understand Yang Kai's life experiences. Many of the human race's upper echelons were trying their best to prevent the human race from forgetting their greatest hero, Yang Kai. On top of that, the Ninth Order Master once again convened a meeting after the army had returned. Everyone felt that the world was vast and time was difficult to measure, so they decided that the year the Crusade force returned to the Star Boundary would be designated as the first year of the Void era. Void was a title, the title of one of the greatest heroes that was slowly being forgotten. As time passed away, new generations of humans were born, matured, and aged. Everyone had already forgotten about Yang Kai, even the Ninth Order Masters who had fought alongside him, but the statues that had been erected remained standing tall. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 6003, 8,000 Years, Marshall Peak, Void Era, Year 7 999. The Star Boundary, where High Heaven Cave Heaven, which was ranked first among the 36 cave heavens, was located, had its ban on entry lifted. Immediately, countless cultivators who were waiting outside the Star Boundary swarmed in and spread out. The cultivators were entering the star boundary from every possible direction, and were in huge numbers. Although there were all sorts of people among the crowd, no one dared to act rashly on the star boundary. No matter what their temperament was, they had become kind and simple after setting foot onto this universe world. This wasn't just because the star boundary was the domain of the strongest cave heaven, but also because Tao temples of all the other cave heavens and paradises were located here. It could be said that one could find 7th Order masters casually walking the streets in the star boundary. Even 8th Order masters were as common as dogs. Only the sighting of the legendary 9th Order masters, who generally remained hidden, would cause some minor sensation. If anyone acted irreverently here, not to mention the sun tomorrow, he or she might not even see the moon tonight. The main reason why the star boundary was so lively was because the Void Festival that was celebrated once every millennia would be held here. Many of the younger generation didn't know the origins of this festival, only that a ceremony was held at the turn of every millennium of the Void era, and it had been celebrated 7 times already. And if the one that was about to be held was also counted, this would be the 8th. Rumor had it that 8,000 years ago, the living environment of the human race was extremely harsh. At that time, there was a species called the Black Ink clan that nearly wiped out the human race and conquered the known universe. Back then, the human race was truly on the verge of extinction. However, thanks to its many great heroes and brave soldiers, the human race slowly regained their footing. In the end, the entire human race launched a grand crusade and completely eradicated the Black Ink clan. From then on, the human race became the true rulers of this world. As for the Void Festival, it was held to commemorate all the humans who gave their lives in the war against the Black Ink clan. It could be considered the biggest event in the entire human race. The festival would be celebrated for an entire year, during which anyone could freely enter the star boundary. It had to be known that as the territory of the strongest cave heaven, it was normally forbidden for outsiders to enter. This wasn't because High Heaven Cave Heaven was tyrannical, but because they had no other choice. Since the end of the Great War 8,000 years ago, although the human race had managed to quell the Black Ink disaster that had lasted for millions of years, they had paid an extremely heavy price. Countless masters had died in battle, while the entire 3,000 worlds had been devastated by the Black Ink clan. The only universe worlds suitable for the survival of the human race were the ones in High Heaven territory and the Myriad Monsters territory. The number of habitable universe worlds had been significantly reduced, and as such, the living environment had also suffered. Cultivation resources were also in short supply. As such, the birth of too many cultivators would inevitably lead to chaos. So, the current cultivators could no longer be as unrestrained as they were before the Black Ink clan invaded the 3,000 worlds. Everything had to be done in a planned manner. 8,000 years ago, the 9th Order masters had jointly held a discussion and reached a consensus, which was that anyone with the aptitude to cultivate would have to report to the cave heavens and paradises, and their cultivation matters would be arranged by one of these top forces. This decision was strictly enforced with the joint efforts of all the human race forces. So, all cultivators of the human race, regardless of their background or cultivation, were duly noted and recorded. This decision made the already special star boundary even more exclusive. The star boundary had a world tree clone, and was the first open heaven realm cradle. The second open heaven realm cradle was the Myriad Monsters world. In the years when the human race was fighting the Black Ink clan, the 2 open heaven realm cradles, the star boundary and Myriad Monsters world, had given birth to many high-rank open heaven realm masters. It could be said that these 2 open heaven realm cradles played a huge role in the human race's victory in the final battle. However, after the war ended, because of the limit in habitable areas, it was difficult for the human race to withstand the birth of so many new generation cultivators, which put the star boundary and Myriad Monster world in an extremely awkward position. After returning from the crusade and realizing this problem, the human race's higher-ups made another decision, which was to withdraw everyone from the star boundary and Myriad Monster world, especially the large number of ordinary people. These ordinary people could not cultivate, but given their huge numbers, they could give birth to many children, some of which would have the aptitude for cultivation. If restrictions weren't put in place, it wouldn't be long before new generations of cultivators were born, which would inevitably lead to unnecessary unrest. Even the people who remained in the star boundary and myriad monsters world were forbidden from having children. If they wanted to have children, they would have to leave these two open heaven realm cradles. Of course, the human race's upper echelons also knew that cutting off all avenues forward was not sustainable, so they left behind a glimmer of hope. That hope lay in the Void Festival that was held every 1,000 years. During this one-year-long grand festival, everyone was allowed to freely enter and exit the star boundary. If one could join one of the Tao temples of the various cave heavens and paradises, they would naturally be qualified to remain in the star boundary to cultivate. It was difficult to calculate how many people had entered the star boundary every time the grand festival started, but the number who could truly worship the various Tao temples was not that high. This led to a strange phenomenon, which was that many pregnant women or young married couples would enter the star boundary during the festival. Those pregnant women would then find a place with excellent world energy and live with their families, nourishing their fetus in peace, so that their unborn babies could enjoy the feedback from the World Tree clone. As for those young couples, they were only 2 when they arrived, but when they left, their wives' stomachs would most likely be bulging. Jade Mountain Square, an extremely common market in the star boundary. Because of the decisions made in the past, a large number of humans were relocated away from the star boundary, leaving it quite sparsely populated. Owing to which, places like Jade Mountain Square were usually deserted. In other words, this place was only bustling with humans because the grand festival was approaching and countless people had poured into the star boundary. A young couple was strolling around the market, holding hands. The man was suave and handsome, whereas the woman was as beautiful as a flower. They were a perfect match. The woman's belly happened to be slightly bulging, she was obviously pregnant. At this moment, the husband and wife arrived before a tall statue and looked up. The wife kept reaching out to her husband's hand, who helplessly handed her the food in his hands and grumbled, "I told you not to eat so many sweets, why don't you listen?" His wife didn't even spare him a glance and bit down on the candied fruit in her hand, mumbling, "Who says I am the one who wants to eat it? Clearly it's the child in my stomach who wants to eat." The husband couldn't help but roll his eyes. Every time she brought up the child in her womb, he couldn't do anything about it. "Dear, do you think this young Kai really exists?" The wife quickly finished a stick of candied fruit and took another stick from her husband's hand. "Why are his statues everywhere?" Wherever they went, wherever a human settlement was present, they always found such statues. Rumor had it that these statues had been standing for nearly 8,000 years and had not been eroded by the passage of time at all. Obviously, they were protected by the power of an expert. "How would I know?" the husband brusquely replied. His wife muttered to herself, "His biographies are everywhere, and it seems that everyone has read it intensively." Moreover, according to his biography, he used some kind of profound space-time secret technique in order to defeat the ancient enemy, which caused all traces of him to be erased from people's minds, and that he would never be able to return if everyone truly forgot about him. Counting the time, it just so happens that when this festival starts, it will be the time for him to return. "Dear, why don't we go take a look?" The husband's face darkened. "Why are you looking for him? He's a hero. We humans can have today thanks to his efforts and sacrifices. It's only right that we pay respect to him. His biography has been passed down for 8,000 years, who knows if it's true or not. I think he must be a wise and mighty man." Crunch, crunch, why are you eating my candied fruit? So sour. It's obviously very sweet. According to his biography, he had many wives. Mitch, you finally exposed your wild ambitions. My dear child, your father doesn't want us anymore, our lives are really miserable. No, that's not what I said. Don't be ridiculous. Everywhere where the humans were gathered, similar conversations were happening between the young couples. Under the vigorous promotion and maintenance of various major sects, the biography compiled by Mi Jing Lun had been widely circulated these past 8,000 years. It could be said that any human older than 10 had read Yang Kai's biography at least once. As far as the later generation was concerned, this biography was just a storybook, allowing them to understand the magnificent life of a man named Yang Kai. As for whether the records in this biography were true or fabricated, no one could confirm. This was something even the ancient cultivators of the cave heavens and paradises were unable to determine, because in their memories, many of the things recorded in the biography had indeed happened, but none of them had the slightest impression of the man named Yang Kai being there. If this was really the backlash of the so-called shadow secret technique, it would be too terrifying. Meanwhile, the Ninth Order Masters had gathered at High Heaven Palace. Compared to the crusade back then, the number of Ninth Order Masters had undoubtedly increased. There were more than 100 Ninth Order Masters. After all those rising stars, who possessed the aptitude to advance to the Ninth Order open heaven realm, had gradually advanced over the last 8,000 years. In the main hall, everyone was talking in small groups. Unless there was something important, the Ninth Order Masters seldom gathered together. The Ninth Order Masters also rarely appeared in public. Only a grand event like the Void Festival could gather all the Ninth Order Masters together. With over 100 Ninth Order Masters, the human race's foundation had reached a peak that it had not seen in over 10,000 years. Whether it was the newly advanced Ninth Order Masters, or the old veterans, all of them had participated in the war against the Black Ink clan. Now that they had gathered together, it was only natural for them to reminisce about the glorious past and as they watched the current generation compete against each other. Ouyang Lai was especially boisterous as he moved through the crowd. When he started talking about the great battles he had fought in the past, he unceasingly beamed with joy. When he got excited, he even pulled his disciple, Gong Lian, over. In the past, when this old master was only an 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Master, when I fought against a pseudo-royal lord alone, that pseudo-royal lord wet his pants in terror. This brat saw it with his own eyes. Hey, tell them. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 6004, chanting, Marshall Peak. Gong Lian, who was still called Brat by Ouyang Lai, had already reached the Ninth Order. Basically, his cultivation was the same as Ouyang Lai's, but as there was still a master and disciple relationship between them. Even if he was a Ninth Order Master, he could not go against Ouyang Lai. So, he could not help but nod his confirmation after hearing this. Honored Master is telling the truth. Ouyang Lai's laughter became even more carefree. A few of the newly advanced Ninth Order Masters also started laughing, all of them knowing how Ouyang Lai loved to brag and deciding to just go along with it. All of them had witnessed or experienced the might of a pseudo-royal lord firsthand, and it was definitely not something an 8th Order Master could contend with, unless they formed a battle formation. Be that as it may, back when there weren't many 8th Order Masters, Ouyang Lai had indeed fought a pseudo-royal lord alone, and it was him who was beaten to the point that he had wet his pants. Even so, fighting a pseudo-royal lord alone was still an incredible feat in itself. At that moment, the noisy hall suddenly fell silent, everyone stopped blowing their own trumpet and raised their eyes, looking directly above. In that direction was a calm and composed, half-white-haired Ninth Order Master with a smile on his lips. He swept his gaze over everyone before addressing them. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been 1,000 years since we last met, but it seems everyone's noble bearing is still the same. There are also a few new faces, very good. Everyone greeted with a bow. Greetings, Supreme Commander Mi. The person who had arrived was none other than Mi Jinglun. Although the human race's crusade force and the various armies had been disbanded, Mi Jinglun's title of Supreme Commander had remained. In terms of cultivation, Mi Jinglun might not be the strongest Ninth Order Master, but in every battle against the Black Ink clan, he had played a far greater role than any other Ninth Order Master. There was no battle in which he had not racked his brain hard to map out a strategy for victory, and it was he who had ultimately coordinated and dispatched the various troops. He was a cultivator of the same era as Ouyang Lai, Xiong Shan, and Wei Junyang, but if they were to stand together, Mi Jinglun would definitely look older because he had been under even greater stress and for a longer duration during the thousands of years of war. Above the main hall, Mi Jinglun returned the greeting before continuing, "It's the day of the Void Festival. Counting the time, this is already the 8th celebration, and I'm sure everyone knows what this means." Hearing this, everyone's expressions became solemn. For a long time, there have been gaps in our memories. There appears to be traces of a person's existence in many key memories, but whether it's us or others, none of us can remember this person. I don't know what kind of mood I was in when I oversaw the compilation of this person's biography, but now that I think about it, it was definitely the best decision I've ever made in my life. All the signs indicate that this person should have really existed, and that all the accounts in this person's biography should indeed be true. This person is the greatest contributor to the human race's victory over the Black Ink clan. Unlike the cultivators with low cultivation, although the Ninth Order Masters present here had some gaps in their memories, these missing memories could be perfectly filled in by Yang Kai's biography. Therefore, they could conclude that Yang Kai really did exist and the records in his biography were not fabricated. The reason they had forgotten about Yang Kai was because of the mysteries of the shadow secret technique. A hero cannot be allowed to be forgotten, otherwise, the current human race does not deserve to live. 8,000 years have already passed, and it is time for him to return. The void ceremony has been conducted precisely for this moment. Everyone, the arrangements we had laid back then should be used. It's time to witness the truth. The world only knew that the Void Festival ceremony was a grand event for the entire human race, but didn't know that it was a hidden hand Jing Lun and the other Ninth Order Masters had arranged long ago. When they had set up this contingency back then, perhaps they had still not completely forgotten about Yang Kai, but now, they really could not remember anything about him. It didn't matter if they didn't remember though, as long as the plan worked. Please instruct us, Supreme Commander Mi. The Ninth Order Masters cupped their fists. Jing Lun lightly smiled. Then let us see if all of this is just an unrealistic conjecture on our part or if we really have forgotten something. One after another, the Ninth Order Masters received their orders and flew out of the hall, quickly disappearing, leaving only one Ninth Order Master behind. This was a titled Great Emperor recognized by the Star Boundary and the only surviving Great Emperor who had managed to break through to the Ninth Order. There had been other Ninth Order Great Emperors from the Star Boundary, but they had all fallen during the Crusade. The hall sunk into complete silence as Jing Lun and the Great Emperor patiently waited. 10 days later, Jing Lun finally opened his eyes and glanced at the Ninth Order Great Emperor. It's about time. The Ninth Order Great Emperor slightly nodded before slowly closing his eyes and spreading his divine sense. The next instant, he had become one with the entire Star Boundary. Right then, in every settlement across the universe world, Yang Kai's statues, which had stood tall for 8,000 years, suddenly started glowing, attracting the attention of countless people. Soon after, a voice started to reverberate from the statue, chanting something. What the voice was reciting was the contents of Yang Kai's biography. The voice seemed to contain some kind of mysterious power, causing everyone who heard it to involuntarily stop in their tracks and quietly listen. As the chanting continued, an enormous picture scroll seemed to have filled everyone's vision. The picture scroll was impressively portraying the life of a cultivator named Yang Kai and how he gradually grew to become the strongest, eventually leading the human race to defeat their enemies. Not just in the Star Boundary, even in Myriad Monsters territory, on every universe world where the humans lived, the setup in the statues was activated by the Ninth Order Masters. At this moment, that chanting was simultaneously ringing in the ears of trillions of humans. Once, twice, 3 times. Gradually, people began to read along the voice coming from the statue. Almost everyone had read Yang Kai's biography, and many scholars had even memorized it by heart. Only, the biography which in the past was only read to pass time was given heavy importance today. Trillions of humans were chanting the Void Great Emperor's real name. At the same time, in the distant Void, on the battlefield where the final battle between Yang Kai and Mo was fought, a few people were gathered together inside a floating palace. There weren't many people, only a dozen or so, but apart from a middle-aged couple, the lowest cultivation of the others was the Eighth Order, and there were actually quite a number of Ninth Order Masters present. Everyone gathered here was Yang Kai's close relative. His parents, his wives, his disciples, Yang Xiao, Yang Shui. These people had been waiting here for 8,000 years. Xia Ningchang had originally stayed behind to guard High Heaven Palace because, despite her high cultivation, she had very little experience in fighting. Moreover, she was an alchemy great grandmaster and was more useful stationed in the rear. However, for the final crusade, even she was roped in. After their triumphant return, once Xia Ningchang had helped compile Yang Kai's biography with Jing Lun, she immediately returned here. Naturally, Mi Jing Lun immediately set out to fetch all those close to Yang Kai, bringing Yang Yingfeng and Dong Su Zhu here to meet up with Su Yang and the others to wait for Yang Kai's return. Their wait had now lasted for 8,000 years. Marshall Peak. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.